I'm 90 years old now. I don't say that to impress you. I say it because when you get to be my age, you realize how much of your life you spent being right when you should have been kind. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, about all the arguments I won, about all the times I stood my ground, held my position, refused to bend. I thought that's what strength looked like. I thought that's what self-respect meant. I was wrong. There's a particular kind of silence that fills a house when you live alone at 90. It's not the same as quiet. Quiet can be peaceful. This is different. This is the sound of all the people who aren't there anymore, and some of them aren't there because they died, and some of them aren't there because I pushed them away. I need to tell you about my daughter, Anne. She was born in 1959. I was 28. Her mother, my wife Margaret, she had this way of humming when she did the dishes. Anne picked that up. By the time she was 4, she'd hum the same tuneless melody while she colored at the kitchen table. I worked in accounting, property management firm, decent pay, steady hours. I wasn't absent the way some fathers were. I came home for dinner. I was there on weekends, but I was always tired, always a little irritated, always convinced that the way I did things was the right way. Margaret used to say I had a need to be correct. Not just right, correct, like there was a moral dimension to loading the dishwasher properly or balancing the checkbook to the penny or making sure Anne's homework was done exactly as the teacher specified. I didn't think of it as controlling. I thought of it as standards. Anne was a creative kid. She liked to paint. She'd make these messy, colorful paintings and tape them to the refrigerator. I'd tell her they were nice, but then I'd point out where the proportions were off, where she'd gone outside the lines. I thought I was teaching her to do better. Margaret would give me a look. I'd ignore it. When Anne was 14, she wanted to take an art class instead of advanced algebra. We had a fight about it. A real one. I told her art wasn't practical. I told her she needed to think about college, about her future, about not limiting her options. She cried. I didn't back down. She took the algebra class. She stopped painting after that. Not all at once, but gradually. The paint stayed in her room, untouched. I thought I'd done the right thing. I thought I was being a responsible parent. Margaret didn't agree. She didn't say much about it at the time, but I could feel her disappointment. We started having our own arguments. Small ones at first. About Anne, about money, about whose family we'd visit for the holidays. I had opinions about all of it, and I made sure those opinions were heard. Here's what I'm trying to tell you. I loved them. I loved my wife and my daughter more than anything. But I loved being right more than I loved being close to them. That's a hard thing to admit. Anne went to college in 1977. State school, business degree, exactly what I'd pushed for. She called home once a week, dutifully. The conversations were polite, surface level. She'd tell me about her classes, her roommate, the weather. I'd give her advice she didn't ask for. She met someone her junior year, brought him home for Thanksgiving. His name was David. He was studying music education. Long hair, soft-spoken, earnest. I didn't like him. I didn't hide it either. I asked him what kind of living he expected to make as a music teacher. I asked Anne if she'd really thought this through. I said things at that dinner table that I can still hear echoing in my head 40 years later. David was polite. Anne was quiet. Margaret excused herself and went to the bedroom. After they left, Margaret told me I'd been cruel. I told her I'd been honest. We didn't speak for 2 days. Anne graduated in 1981. She and David got married that summer. Small ceremony, just family and a few friends. I went, but I didn't smile in the pictures. You can see it if you look at them. Everyone else is happy, and I'm standing there with my arms crossed, like I'm attending out of obligation. I was. They moved to Oregon. David got a job teaching middle school band. Anne worked as an office manager. They were happy. I could hear it in her voice on the phone the few times we talked. But those calls got shorter, less frequent. She stopped asking for my advice. She stopped telling me much of anything. I told myself it was natural. Kids grow up, they move away, they build their own lives. I told myself she was busy. Margaret knew better. In 1985, Margaret had a stroke. Not a massive one, but enough to scare us both. She recovered mostly, but something shifted. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She started spending more time in the garden, less time talking to me. I didn't know how to reach her. So I didn't try. Anne came to visit once after the stroke. Stayed for a weekend. I thought we'd have time to reconnect, to talk, but I spent most of that visit criticizing the way she and David were managing their money, the neighborhood they'd chosen, the fact that they didn't seem to be thinking about buying a house. She left early. Margaret confronted me. That night, she said I was driving Anne away. She said I cared more about being right than about having a relationship with our daughter. She said she didn't know how much longer she could live like this. I told her she was being dramatic. She stopped arguing with me after that. She just stopped. Margaret died in 1994. Heart attack, sudden. She was 63. Anne came to the funeral. She was kind, supportive, present. She stayed for a week to help me sort through things. But there was a distance between us that felt permanent. I wanted to talk to her, to really talk. But every time I tried, I found myself correcting something she said, or disagreeing with a decision she'd made, or offering advice about how she should handle her grief. I couldn't stop myself. She went back to Oregon. The phone calls became even less frequent. I spent the next 10 years alone. I worked until I was 72. I kept the house clean. I balanced my finances. I did everything correctly. David died in 2006. Cancer. Anne called to tell me. Her voice was hollow. I flew out for the funeral. Met my grandchildren for the first time. They were teenagers by then. They didn't know me. Anne was gracious. She let me stay with her. She introduced me to her friends, her community. I could see the life she'd built. It was good. It was full. And I wasn't part of it. I tried to talk to her one night after the service. Tried to tell her I was sorry. But what came out instead was a comment about how she should consider moving closer to family, how it wasn't good for her to be so isolated, how she needed to think practically about her future. She looked at me with these tired eyes and said, "Dad, I'm 50 years old. I don't need you to fix my life." I didn't know what to say to that. I flew home the next day. That was 18 years ago. We've talked since then. Birthdays, holidays. She sends cards. She's polite. But we're not close. We never have been. And now I'm 90 and she's 68 and I'm running out of time to fix something I don't think can be fixed. I sit here in this house, the same house where she grew up, and I think about all the moments I chose to be right instead of choosing her. Every correction. Every argument. Every time I made her feel small because I needed to feel superior. I didn't mean to do it. That's what I tell myself. But intention doesn't matter much when the result is the same. There's a box in my closet. Margaret saved it. It's full of Anne's paintings from when she was little. Bright, messy, joyful things. I found it a few years ago when I was cleaning. I sat on the floor and looked through every single one. They're beautiful. Not because they're technically perfect, because they're hers, because you can see her personality in every brushstroke, because she made them when she still trusted me enough to show me who she was. I don't know when she stopped trusting me with that. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small moments. 1,000 times I chose to criticize instead of celebrate. 1,000 times I made her feel like she wasn't enough. Anne has a good life now. I want you to know that. She has friends. She has her kids and now grandkids of her own. She volunteers at a community center. She took up painting again a few years ago. She mentioned it once on the phone. I didn't know what to say. So I asked if she was taking classes, if she was doing it properly. She changed the subject. That's who I am. Even now, even knowing everything I know, I still can't seem to stop myself from trying to be right. But here's what I've learned, and I'm telling you this because I hope you're younger than I am. I hope you still have time. Being right doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't call you on your birthday. It doesn't hold your hand when you're scared. Pride is a cold companion. I won so many arguments with Margaret. I can't even remember what most of them were about now. Whose family to visit? How to discipline Anne? Whether we needed a new car? Stupid, meaningless things that felt important at the time. I won those arguments. And I lost my wife. Not just when she died, I lost her years before that. I lost her every time I chose being correct over being connected. Every time I valued my opinion more than her feelings. Every time I made her feel like she wasn't heard, she stopped trying to reach me. And I told myself it was fine. I told myself we were just settling into a comfortable silence. But it wasn't comfortable. It was lonely for both of us. I think about the day Anne brought David home. I think about how nervous she must have been, how much she must have wanted me to like him, to approve, to be happy for her, and I chose that moment to prove that my standards mattered more than her happiness. I can't take that back. I've thought about calling her, really calling her, not the polite surface level conversations we have now. Calling her and saying everything I should have said 40 years ago. But I'm afraid, and that's the truth, I'm afraid she'll be kind about it. That she'll say it's okay, it's in the past, don't worry about it, because that would mean she's forgiven me without me ever having to really face what I've done. And I don't deserve that, or I'm afraid she'll be honest. That she'll tell me how much I hurt her, how many times she needed a father and got a critic instead, how she spent years in therapy trying to undo the damage I did. Both of those outcomes terrify me. So I don't call. I stay quiet, and the distance remains. This is what it looks like when you choose pride over people. You don't lose them all at once. You lose them slowly. So slowly, you might not even notice until it's too late. You lose them in the moments you refuse to apologize. In the times you insist on having the last word. In the arguments you win but shouldn't have started. You lose them when you make them choose between being close to you and being themselves. And eventually, they choose themselves. As they should. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you this because maybe you're doing the same thing I did. Maybe you have someone in your life right now, someone you love, and you keep choosing to be right instead of choosing them. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's your kid. Maybe it's a friend, a sibling, a parent. Maybe you think you're helping them, teaching them, guiding them, setting standards. Maybe you think there will be time to soften later, to apologize later, to fix it later. I thought that too. But later now becomes never. I'm 90 years old. My daughter is 68. I don't know how much time either of us has left, and I spent our whole relationship trying to mold her into what I thought she should be, instead of loving who she actually was. That's the thing I wish I could go back and tell my younger self the thing I wish someone had told me. Your child doesn't need you to be right. They need you to be present. They need you to see them, to listen to them, to make space for who they are, not who you want them to be. Your spouse doesn't need you to win arguments. They need you to be a partner, to value their perspective, even when it's different from yours, to choose connection over correctness. The people you love don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be humble enough to admit when you're wrong, to apologize without defending yourself, to prioritize the relationship over your ego. I couldn't do that. And now I sit in this house alone and I think about all the moments I'd have chosen differently. I think about the night Anne tried to show me her paintings when she was 12, how excited she was, how I pointed out everything wrong instead of telling her I was proud. I think about the morning Margaret tried to talk to me about feeling lonely in our marriage, how I told her she was being oversensitive instead of asking what she needed. I think about Thanksgiving 1979, how I could have welcomed David, how I could have seen that Anne was happy and let that be enough. I think about all of it. And I can't change any of it. That's what time does. It takes possibility and turns it into permanence. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I wanted to tell you this story because maybe you're not as far down this road as I am. Maybe you still have time. If someone you love is pulling away from you, ask yourself why. Ask yourself if you're making them feel heard or just making them feel wrong. If you're in an argument with someone you care about, ask yourself what you're really fighting for. Are you fighting for the truth or are you fighting to win? If you're holding on to a grudge, onto being right about something that happened years ago, ask yourself what that's costing you. Because I can tell you what it cost me. It cost me my marriage. It cost me my daughter. It cost me grandchildren I barely know. It cost me great-grandchildren who will never know me at all. It cost me everything that mattered. And for what? So I could be right? So I could maintain my standards? So I could feel superior? None of that matters now. None of that keeps me company. I don't know how much longer I have. Months, maybe a year. My health is failing. I know how this ends, and I'll die the way I lived the second half of my life. Alone, correct? Unbending. I don't want that for you. If this story means something to you, I hope you'll think about the people in your life. The ones you love, the ones you might be pushing away without realizing it. Call them, not to give advice, not to prove a point, just to listen, just to be there. Choose them over your pride, because your pride will stay with you until the end. But it won't hold your hand when you need it most.